We're doing the second part of this book, Smarter, Faster, Better. As most of you will know if you're jumping onto this, my name is Adam Steele, and each week we dive into either a new book or the second part of a book. Sometimes they're a little bit big, like this particular one, Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. And we just pull out, I just pull out sort of the best things from this book, like the best tips or tricks or most actionable items. And I save you the effort of having to actually read the book. So I try and pull out sort of the most important stuff. Before we get going on this book, I am going to take care of a couple admin related things. Just have to get the link shared and whatnot. And then we'll get going. It only takes me a couple minutes. I'm getting a little bit faster at it every single time that we do this. And I think we've done this. I think this is like our 8th or 9th or heck, maybe even 10th book so far. That's kind of cool. And I will announce now, the next book is going to be The Alliance by Reid Hoffman and Charles Yeh, I think it is. Yeah, Y-E-H. They're the founders, two of the founders of LinkedIn, two of three, I can't remember, of LinkedIn. And they wrote a great book about managing people. Prospecting people too, I suppose. I've read it before, and it's actually been one that we did. I think it was the first one we ever did on office hours or what have you. I think I'm going to rebrand it as Book Club, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that once I get this done. Almost done here. So I'm going to send this out. Right. Okay. One more thing to do, and then we'll get going. Sorry, I'm not a great multitasker. I wish I was, never have been. I've read a number of times that humans in general just suck at multitasking, and I tend to agree with that sentiment. I think that is absolutely accurate. What's up, Serge? Yo, yo. All right. Almost there. And boom, done. Okay, so again, I apologize if I'm repeating myself. We're diving into Smarter, Faster, Better. I've got my cameras done in such a way that now I look at the exact same camera, basically. So that's kind of dope. Smarter, Faster, Better. It's a book on productivity. I know Serge has read it already. He read it before me even. It's by Charles Duhigg. He wrote The Power of Habit as well, which is a little bit more technical a book, but good nonetheless. We're doing the second half. We did the first half the last time. If you did not catch the last one, I would go to my Facebook page. I think it's facebook.com/ I mean, if you're watching this, I'm sure you can find your way to it. But it is facebook.com/ the Adam G. Steele, Steele. And we did the first part. Now we're doing the second part. I didn't know that I would find enough stuff to actually do another office hours on this, but it turns out I did. I actually read the second part a second time because the first time I didn't find all that much stuff, but the second time I did. So next week we're going to be doing The Alliance. Now this was the first one we did for office hours or book club, and I didn't do an actual call on it, or not call, like an actual sort of book club video thing-a-do on it. And I definitely didn't pull out any notes. So we're going to do it over again because I'm finding that now that I'm kind of getting some of this productivity stuff down, or I'm starting to introduce it into my life and it's starting to really kind of work out now, and I've come up with these goals and all these kinds of things. Now it's about encouraging my team to continue to follow me on this journey and to reach for the stars. And I hope that this book, The Alliance, is going to help me. What's up, Pops? Is going to help me get there. So that's for next week. It's a really short read. So if you want to join me, if you want to read it for next week, and then we can discuss it, or you can ask questions or whatever. Remember, we do a Google Hangout as well. In fact, why don't I get this? Why don't I get this Google Hangout link? How do I do this? There we go. Copy paste. I'm going to post this. Some people might prefer to have a little conversation, and I would be very down for that. So I'm going to post that in the comments section here on Facebook. Google Hangout. I don't know what a Google Hangout is. Basically, it's kind of like this, except it's kind of like a Skype. You can Skype and you can talk to each other and that kind of thing. Similar to Skype. We use this. My team uses this all the time. This is how we meet each week, or rather, almost each day, quite often, or quite honestly. So there, it's posted in there if anybody wants to have a conversation. I've tried that a few times and it works out pretty well. What's up, John? Let's get into it. Let's get right into it. I'm gonna have a sip of tea. I'm getting sick, unfortunately, or I am somewhat sick. I'm like right on the brink. So everything I do, I have to be this. Got to make sure I'm doing my vitamins. Got to make sure I'm sleeping enough, which is basically never happens. So I don't know. Maybe I get an extra 30 minutes. And hydrate, obviously. So without further ado, for those who just joined, Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. We are doing the second part. The first part is on, if you scroll down Facebook, on my Facebook page, it's down there. It's on YouTube. But we are moving on. We'll go over a couple of the things that we covered last week. But for the most part, we're moving on to new material. What is this book about? This book is about being more productive, getting more stuff done, getting more of the right stuff done. It's kind of the topic of the last couple months that I've been doing this. And it's about being more productive both in life and in your business life as well. So the way this works, for those who've not been here before, is I highlight stuff that I dig, stuff that is meaningful to me, stuff that I imagine might be meaningful to you, and then I apply a little context where that is possible. One thing I've found myself lacking in is context, or I forget the context, or I forget why I highlighted it. So what I've started to do is I make these little notes, and so when I forget, I can refer to that, and so that this is hopefully a little bit more valuable for everyone. All right, let's get to it. The best, this is a little bit of a lengthy one, so bear with me. There must be some good stuff in it. The best entrepreneurs are acutely conscious of the risks that come from only talking to people who have succeeded. So only talking to people who've been successful, who have always been successful, said Don Moore, the Berkeley professor who participated in the GJP, and who, I don't know what that stands for anymore, and who also studies the psychology of entrepreneurship. They are obsessed with spending time. So these are the best entrepreneurs. They are obsessed with spending time around people who complain about their failures, the kinds of people the rest of us generally try to avoid. This ultimately is one of the most important secrets to learning how to make better decisions. And this chapter is about making better decisions. Making good choices relies on forecasting the future. Accurate forecasting requires exposing ourselves to as many successes and disappointments as possible, to as many failures as possible, and learning from those failures. This is hard because success is easier to stare at, much easier to talk about. People are certainly more obliged to talk about their successes than their failures. So the next time a friend misses out on a promotion, ask him why. The next time a deal falls through, call up the other side to find out what you did wrong. I always do that, and I feel so annoying. when I think I'm going to make a sale, I'll call them up and I'll be like, hey, what went wrong? And they're totally taken aback by that approach. And I think some of them are a bit weirded out by it, but I suck up my pride and do it anyways, because it's a good opportunity for learning. Get it right next time. The next time you have a bad day or you snap at your spouse, don't simply tell yourself that things will go better next time. Instead, force yourself to really figure out what happened. Then use those insights to forecast more potential futures, to dream up more possibilities of what might occur. You'll never know with 100% certainty how things will turn out. But the more you force yourself to envision potential futures, the more you learn about which assumptions are certain or flimsy, the better odds of making a great decision next time. I wrote a couple notes down here. I've talked about this before. There's this, I found anyways, there's kind of this culture, and there's been some books written about it, about failing fast and failing often. And what I feel that fails to mention is that you don't really want to fail all that often. I get the failing fast part, but I'm not sure I get the fail often. Because I feel like if you're failing so often, you're not learning from the past failure. You would fail less often if perhaps you spent a little less time failing, a little more time learning from the failure, analyzing the failure, figuring out what went wrong and how you can improve from it. So that was my little note of context for you there. All right, skipping ahead, we are now moving on to the chapter titled Innovation: How Idea Brokers and Creative Desperation Saved Disney's Frozen, which is an animated film, which I don't think I really cover a lot in my notes, but we'll see. Now, let's make sure I'm starting from the right place. Quick tea break. My apologies. I am thirsty. All this reading makes me thirsty. It was this combination of ideas, rather than ideas themselves, that typically made a paper so creative and important. If you consider some of the biggest intellectual innovations of the past half century, you can see this dynamic at work. The field of behavioral economics, which has remade how companies and governments operate, emerged in the mid-1970s and 80s when economists began applying long-held principles from psychology to economics and asking questions why perfectly sensible people bought lottery tickets. Or to cite other juxtapositions of familiar ideas in novel ways, today's internet social networking companies grew when software programmers borrowed public health models that were originally developed to explain how viruses spread and applying them to how friends share updates. Physicians can now map complicated genetic sequences rapidly because researchers have transported the math of Bayes' rule into laboratories examining how genes evolve. Fostering creativity by juxtaposing old ideas in original ways isn't new. Historians have noted that most of Thomas Edison's inventions were the result of importing ideas from one area of science into another. That's a lot to chew on. I will finish up with the last bit and then I'll tell you what that kind of means to me anyways. Ideos, which I don't know what stands for, designers created a top-selling water bottle, for example. So they're going to give us some more examples of inventions, essentially, that brought two sort of different things together to create an idea. Ideo designers created a top-selling water bottle, for example, by mixing a standard water carafe with the leak-proof nozzle of a shampoo container. The power of combining old ideas in new ways also extends to finance, where prices of stock derivatives are calculated by mixing formulas originally developed to describe the motion of dust particles with gambling techniques. Modern bike helmets, this is interesting, exist because a designer wondered if he could take a boat's hull, which can withstand nearly any collision, I don't know about that, and design it into the shape of a hat. Let me just read my context here. So what this kind of means to me is it's important to not, I think we tend to surround ourselves with a lot of the same people, both in business and in life. You know, the same people from the same walk of life with some of the same experiences. And a lot of these inventions perhaps would not have existed or wouldn't have existed so soon had the inventors done the same. But instead they looked outside their purview, outside their network or outside their specialty, and were able to sort of collaborate with a different, you know, whether it be a different profession or a different thing, and they were able to make something brand new as a result of it. So there are some other examples where guys were totally stumped, and it wasn't until they sort of looked outside of the science lab, I think this particular example was, before they found sort of the breakthrough they were looking for. I think that's basically it. It's a very wordy way of saying something pretty simple. But I think we can all relate to that. It's tempting to surround ourselves with the same people because it's easy to have a conversation with them, right? We share the same experiences. We can talk about the same things, but probably would have a lot more value if you surrounded yourself with folks that don't share those same experiences. Moving on. When strong ideas take root, they can sometimes crowd out competitors so thoroughly that alternatives can't prosper. So sometimes the best way to spark creativity is by disturbing things just enough to let some light through. And they gave some excellent examples of where this occurs in nature and with humans and so on and so forth. One example was a tree falling. So a tree falling in the forest. And there was some studies that they did, and they examined sort of the biodiversity that was otherwise non-existent or less existent before that tree fell. But when that tree fell, there was like this rejuvenation. You know, as we've probably seen when a tree falls, there's all kinds of stuff that grows on it, mushrooms and all kinds of creatures start breaking it down. And so it's sort of the same thing. This strong idea, this tree fell down, and as a result, other things which otherwise would not have been able to survive, other ideas perhaps, are now able to take root. They're able to breathe and come to. Another example is a fire in a forest. What other ones? I said moving someone into a position they aren't familiar with, thereby disrupting the chain of command. So give somebody who didn't previously have, control, make them a director, for example, and that will sort of shake things up. It'll shake the chain of command up enough that new ideas will be created. And they give another great example of Pixar. They were struggling on the Frozen movie, and they had like a 16-month deadline to make it happen, to basically from start to finish create that film. And they were really blocked on ideas, and so they took one of the creatives and made them the director. And for whatever reason, that sort of shook things up enough that that person was able to sort of get them out of that groove, get them out of that funk. Moving on. All right, still we are talking about creativity and innovation. Creativity can't be reduced to a formula. At its core, it needs novelty, surprise, and other elements that cannot be planned in advance to seem fresh and new. There is no checklist that, if followed, delivers innovation on demand. But the creative process is different. So creative process versus creativity. But the creative process is different. We can create conditions that help creativity flourish. We know, for example, that innovation becomes more likely when old ideas are mixed in new ways. So we covered that before. We know the odds of success go up when brokers, people with fresh, different perspectives, so people from the outside, people from outside your organization, people with different specialties, people with different ideas, who have seen ideas in a variety of settings, different settings than your own, draw on the diversity within their heads. We know that sometimes a little disturbance, we talked about the tree, can help jolt us out of the ruts that even the most creative thinkers fall into, as long as those shakeups are the right size. And there was like one example where they were talking about a fire in a forest, and a little fire is good, but a complete devastation is not good. So they say as long as those shakeups, those fires are the right size. If you want to become a broker, an idea broker, a creative broker, and increase the productivity of your own creative process, there are 3 things that can help. First, be sensitive to your own experiences. Pay attention to how things make you think and feel. That's how we distinguish cliches from true insights. As Steve Jobs put it, the best designers are those who have thought more, so it's quote, have thought more about their experiences than other people, end quote. There's a good example. I just picked up my first Mac, and I only notice it now because now I have one. Hey, Melly, everything is so thoughtful. They thought about every single interaction, both physical and non-physical, with a Mac computer, and they redesigned it. And it's little things like Mike on our team, he mentioned like the trackpad, for example. Use a trackpad on a normal laptop versus the trackpad on the Apple laptop, totally different experience. They've got like these on like the PC, for example, they've got these little borders, like you're inset. And so you try and track left, and you hit this border, and then the pointer or the cursor jumps, and it's just smooth with the Apple. So they just think about these little things. They're more thoughtful. They think more about their experiences, which makes them better creatives. Second, recognize that the panic and stress you feel as you try to create isn't a sign that everything is falling apart. Rather, it's the condition that helps make us flexible enough to seize something new. Creative desperation, as it's called, can be critical. Anxiety is what often pushes us to see old ideas in new ways. The path out of that turmoil is to look at what you know, to reinspect conventions you've seen work, and try to apply them to fresh problems. The creative pain should be embraced. So like facing deadlines. Deadlines are a good thing. They force us to be more creative. Finally, remember that the relief accompanying a creative breakthrough, while sweet, can also blind us to seeing alternatives. It is critical to maintain some distance from what we create. Without self-criticism, without tension, one idea can quickly crowd out competitors. So it's good to have a devil's advocate in the room. It's good to have other folks from other places in the room. But we can regain that critical distance by forcing ourselves to critique what we've already done, by making ourselves look at it from a completely different perspective, by changing the power dynamics. We talked about moving that person up to a director, by changing the power dynamics in the room or giving new authority to someone who didn't have it before. Disturbances are essential, and we retain clear eyes by embracing destruction and upheaval, as long as we're sensitive to making the disturbance the right size. Sorry, this is a long one. There's an idea that runs through these 3 lessons. The creative process is, in fact, a process, something that can be broken down and explained. That's important because it means that anyone can become more creative. We can all become innovation brokers. We all have experiences and tools, disturbances and tensions that can make us into idea brokers. If that is, we're willing to embrace that desperation and upheaval and try to see our old ideas in new ways. Creativity is just problem solving. Ed Catmull once told me. Ed Catmull is like what is he? I'm pretty sure he's the founder of Pixar, which, interesting story. He started Pixar. So he left, I want to say he left Disney because his ideas were too out there. Disney didn't like that. He left, he started Pixar. Apple picked up Pixar for like pennies on the dollar. And then Apple resold, so like, you know, some millions of dollars. And then Apple resold Pixar. What's up, Eric? Apple resold Pixar to Disney for like billions. Pretty interesting. So Ed Catmull was, I believe, is the founder and is still the president at Pixar. Once people see, this is what Ed Catmull says, quote, once people see it as problem solving, it stops seeming like magic, because it's not. Brokers, idea brokers, are just people who pay more attention to what problems look like and how they've been solved before. People who are most creative are the ones who have learned that feeling scared is a good sign. We just have to learn how to trust ourselves enough to let that creativity out. Cool. So next, howdy, Eric. So next we jump into absorbing data. And one quick note before we jump into absorbing data. I don't know if you've noticed, I've mentioned it a couple times, but I don't know if anybody has outright noticed. Good. There is a reason, and it's directly related to absorbing data. There is a reason this little, we'll call it a book club, we'll call it office hours, I'll probably call it book club going forward, come to think of it, exists. It exists because it gives me the opportunity to absorb data. It gives me the opportunity to try and teach, which helps me learn. It gives me a reason to stay committed. It gives me a reason to go over this, you know, everything I've highlighted in this book, to create little notes of context with these little Post-its, to label it with these little suckers. It gives me a reason to do that. And that's what helps me absorb the data better. So now we're going to learn other data absorption tips. Back to the book. One way to overcome information blindness is to force ourselves to grapple with the data in front of us, to manipulate information by transforming it into a sequence of questions to be answered or choices to be made. This is sometimes referred to as creating disfluency, because it relies on doing a little bit of work instead of simply choosing the house wine. You have to ask yourself a series of questions: white or red, expensive or cheap. So instead of just reading the book cover to cover, take the time to absorb it by highlighting it, by tabbing it, by writing down what it means to you, by teaching it to someone else, by discussing it with someone else. The important step seems to be performing some kind of operation, said Adam Atler, a professor at NYU who has studied disfluency, so creating disfluency. If you make people use a new word in a sentence, they'll remember it longer. If you make them write down a sentence with the word, they'll start using it in conversations. I remember when I used to somewhat do my homework, didn't often do it, which is why I probably failed as many classes as I did. When I was actually interested in what I was learning, I forgot to tag this page. That's embarrassing. When the times I actually did retain information was the times I actually wrote it down. So I would read it in the textbook, and then I would start writing it down. I would write down what I was reading. Sometimes I would write down everything that I read on that page, and it would take for fucking ever, but it would actually start to sink in. Back to the book. Oops. Sticky. The real focus of Mr. Edwards' class, and so Mr. Edwards is this fellow that was brought into, I don't remember where it was, a school system in some state that was really struggling, bad neighborhoods, or bad neighborhood, just underfunded, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, I don't think it was underfunded. I think The school just did not know how to teach these kids that were growing up in these wild households with low income and so on and so forth. So he took a new approach. He created a process for them to deal with daily life, but also for them to deal with what he was putting in front of them. So there's the little context for you, so this makes some sense. The real focus of Mr. Edwards' class was a system for decision making known as the engineering design process. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I don't know if you can see it. You can kind of see it. I'll leave that for a second there. Okay, and I'll read about it in just a second. Which force students to define their dilemmas, collect data, brainstorm solutions, debate alternative approaches, and conduct iterative experiments. The engineering design process is a series of steps that engineers follow when they are trying to solve a problem and design a solution for something. It is a methodical approach to problem solving. One teacher's manual explained the engineering design process was built around the idea that many problems that seem overwhelming at first can be broken down into smaller pieces, and then solutions tested again and again until insights emerge. The process asked students to define precisely the dilemma they wanted to solve, then to conduct research and come up with multiple solutions, and then conduct tests, measure results, and repeat the procedure until an answer was found. It told them to make problems more manageable until they fit into scaffolds and mental folders that were easier to carry around. So this, I'll show that what that looks like again. So it starts at the top. Top is define the dilemma, collect data, brainstorm solutions, debate approaches, and experiment. And so it's a way to take lots and lots and lots of data that would be otherwise overwhelming. And an example they gave was they did some studies on folks who were given 401k options by their employer, and they would give somebody like 5 401k options, 15, 25, 50, 60, 100, and basically tracked each one of those sample groups and tracked how many of them actually signed up for the 401k. And it seemed that there was like this breaking point at like, I think it was like more than 25. So if you give someone more than 25 options, they just don't do anything at all. People were signing up under 25 options, but over 25 options, people were they're just putting it in their desk essentially and not looking at it. It was too much for them to process. And so with these kids growing up in the inner city, in this particular case, God, I wish I remembered where it was. Doesn't really matter. They had so much going on at home, whether it was like and I think there was some case where like their sister was pregnant, their parents just lost their job, they had just been uprooted, and now they're living with their grandparents. They need, the youngest daughter now is being asked to babysit for the oldest daughter. How can that kid be expected to learn inside a classroom when they got all that other shit going on in their head, right? So this model, this engineering design process is a way to deal with all that data, to absorb all that data and come out the other end with a good decision. And I put a little note in here. This might prove helpful to me when deciding to drop a company or product or idea or not. So if I have a product that just isn't doing that well, and in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, it does this, but there's good reasons to keep it for this and that and this, and it's just too overwhelming to look at. I'm just not even going to look at it. This is a way where I can approach that product and sort of look at it somewhat objectively and decide, is it something we want to keep around, or should I shut this business down? Is there any good reason to keep it? Just makes data less onerous. Moving on. Right, back to the book. When we encounter new information and want to learn from it, we should force ourselves to do something with the data. Talked a little bit about that, writing shit down, right? It's not enough for you it's not enough for your bathroom scale to send, put a star by this paragraph, it must be good, to send daily updates to an app on your phone. So like your Fitbit, for example. It's not enough to encourage you to actually do some shit. If you want to lose weight, force yourself to plot those measurements on graph paper, and you'll be more likely to choose a salad over a hamburger at lunch. If you read a book filled with new ideas, force yourself to put it down and explain the concepts to someone sitting next to you, and you'll be more likely to apply them in your life. When you find a new piece of information, force yourself to engage with it, to use it in an experiment, or to describe it to a friend. And then you will start building the mental folders that are at the core of learning. Every choice we make in life is an experiment. Every day offers fresh opportunities to find better decision-making frames. We live in a time when data is more plentiful, cheaper to analyze, and easier to translate into action than ever before. Smartphones, websites, digital databases, and apps put information at our fingertips. But it only becomes useful if we know how to make sense of it. Enough said. I got a little note here. I already said that. Moving on. That actually brings us to the end of the book. But this book is built like no other. It's very weird. It's a tease. Reaching the end of this one because it is a big bastard, but strangely, it has an appendix which basically summarizes everything you've learned, which is awesome for a person like me. So basically right now we are at page, super weird, we're at page 265. Then it has an appendix where it summarizes everything we learned, which is awesome, as I mentioned. Then it has, so that brings us to page 288. Then it has acknowledgements. That brings us to page 294. And then it has like 100 pages of notes. So this is like where he got like all the scientific data, all the interviews he performed, all the stuff that would normally, I guess, be in the footer, he put in the back of the book. I didn't read any of this, so I'm not going to force you to listen to me. But I will go over the stuff in the appendix because I think it really sort of wraps this book up real nice. And it says things with a little bit more brevity, I suppose, than perhaps I otherwise could or did. So back to the book. We are now going back to motivation. We covered motivation in the first part of this book. So we're going to talk a little bit more about motivation. Tea break, my apologies. My tea is cold, lovely. Motivation becomes easier when we transform a chore into a choice. Doing so gives us a sense of control. General Krulak had told me something that stuck with me. Quote, most recruits don't know how to force themselves to start something hard. But if we can train them to take the first step by doing something that makes them feel in charge, it's easier to keep going. I got a note here. Just get started, I say, my little note. However small, but what you choose to do most, but what you choose to do must be of your choosing. You decide how you will get started. So for example, you got a big inbox full of emails. Decide how you're going to get started. It has to be something you come up with, not something someone else comes with. Because if it's something you come up with, you're going to commit to it more. So if you had 20, let's say you have 20 emails, unread emails, open up each one of them and And just write one line to each one of those 20 emails. Open 20 tabs if your computer can do that. It brings mine to a screaming halt. Open 20 tabs and just write one line. You are now committed to that email. So you don't want that in your draft now. You don't want 20 emails in your draft. So you've written one line, you've committed to it, and you've done so on your own terms. A book, read a chapter. You're more likely to finish that book than you were previous to reading that first chapter. So come up with your way of starting and start, however small that may be. Doesn't matter. Does not matter one little bit. Well, don't open the book and then close it. Do something. Moving on. Self-motivation becomes easier when we see our choices as affirmations of our deeper values and goals. That's why Marine Corps recruits ask each other why. Why are you climbing this mountain? Why are you missing the birth of your daughter? Why are you cleaning a mess hall or doing push-ups or running onto a battlefield where there are safer, easier ways to live? Forcing ourselves to explain why we are doing something helps us remember that this chore is a step along a longer path, and that by choosing to take that journey, we are closer to more meaningful objectives. So it might be putting together a down payment for a home, which your family's going to live in. Might be a good example of that, right? It's meaningful. It's a meaningful objective. Motivation is triggered by making choices that demonstrate to ourselves that we are in control and that we are moving towards goals that are meaningful. It's that feeling of self-determination that gets us going. Don't think I can say that any better. All right, now we are to the focus part of the appendix. I read this all over again this morning, actually. I don't like when I fumble through these books. I get embarrassed. So I reread it to make sure that I knew what I was talking about. We aid our focus by building mental models, telling ourselves stories about what we might expect to see. To stay focused, envision what will happen, what will occur first, what are potential obstacles, how will you preempt them. Telling yourself a story about what you expect to occur makes it easier to decide where your focus should go when your plan encounters real life situations. I got a little note here. I got to watch myself with some of these notes. Some of them are personal to myself. I want to go ahead and just read something super personal, right? Well, let's just give this a shot. For me, I ask myself how this distraction helps me get closer to my stretch or big, hairy, audacious goal, bag goal. If it doesn't, I am more resolved in my focus. I have found that so when I'm looking at what I'm doing during the day, when I start to lose focus, when I find myself drifting towards Facebook or drifting towards something easier, I ask myself, because I know what my goal is. I know what my goals are. I ask myself, how does what I am presently doing contribute to my overall goal, to my big goal, to my stretch goal? If you don't know what a stretch goal is, look it up. And if it doesn't contribute to that goal, I have a pretty good reason not to do it. And so I don't do it. It's that easy. I think that's it. I lied. There's one more thing. I didn't put a tab on this one. We almost missed it. In the end, however, none of them worked. The lesson he offered, that a single-minded devotion to an idea can spur massive change, turned out not to be universal and important as other concepts I wanted to explain. I know why I didn't tab it. I don't know what the fuck that means. I think they were giving an example about some dude who devoted his entire life to a single thing, one single focus, which sounds pretty crazy, to making a shipping container. It's pretty exciting. A shipping container. The shipping containers we see today were developed by this guy, this McLean guy. Before, they weren't transporting goods that way. So he came up with the shipping container. And the author was looking at a bunch of things to include in the book. And that guy, this McLean guy, because he found other evidence that this didn't work for other people, this sole, single-minded devotion to one idea, he didn't include it. I got another one here. And again, I don't know if I didn't tab it for a reason. Productivity doesn't mean that every action is efficient. It doesn't mean that waste never occurs. In fact, as Disney learned, sometimes you have to foster tension to encourage creativity. Sometimes a misstep, waste, for example, lack of focus, for example, sometimes a misstep is the most important footfall along the path to success. And that, my friends, is the book. Again, we were reading Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. This is one of 2 books that he has. This was part 2. If you missed part 1, which would have covered, what would it have covered? It would have covered managing others. It would have covered goal setting. There was some really good goal setting stuff in here. Focus, teams. It was a little bit light on the team section, and motivation, where it really delivered. We have part 1. It's on the Facebook page. You'll have to go to it, facebook.com/the Adam G. Steele. And just scroll down, you'll find it. It's on YouTube as well. We covered part 1, and I highly recommend it. If you go check it out on YouTube, I goofed. The first 10 minutes, my mic was not on. So just scroll forward 10 minutes if that is your choice of listening. Next week, and I should say, I think I'm going to change this. Office hours. What the hell does that mean? I don't know what that means. Eric, everything you show is mirrored. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you can change that. Huh. I'm going to look into it, Eric. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate it. As I was saying before Eric so thoughtfully interrupted, I'm joking, of course. What was I saying? I am probably going to rename this whole effort book club, a book club of sorts. Now, in a book club, typically, the other people read the book as well, right? I don't care whether you read it or not. I mean, I would like you to read it, but not everybody has the time yet. You can make the time. I'm going to teach you how to make the time. Everybody has the time yet to read these books, so I'm very happy to summarize them for you, to pull out the best stuff for you. But if you would like, we're going to start calling this book club. And if you want to, like Serge, clap, 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 clap for Serge. If you want to read the book at the same time I do, Serge actually beat me to it. Kudos to him, sir. Next week, we're going to read The Alliance. So I'm going to read this book between now and then. I've read it before. I've listened to it on an audiobook as well. I'm going to read it a 3rd time because right now I know I could use this stuff for helping or learning how to move my team in the right direction, to learn how to help me help them reach their goals in exchange for them helping me reach my own or reach my organization's or our organization's goal. So this is a very timely book. And that's how I pick books. I've mentioned it before. I pick books based on what's going to help me now. So I think it was a good choice to start out with productivity. I think everybody can really relate to that. And this book, anybody who is employed or is an employer, which is basically everyone, or has been or will be, this is a good book. It's a short read. It's got big font. Look at this. Look at this sucker. You could read this in 2 hours if you're a fast reader, 4 hours if you're slow like me. It'll probably take me 6. But we're going to get through it. I'm going to pull out some stuff, and we're going to meet back here. We're going to meet back here Wednesday. We do this every Wednesday for those who don't know. Every Wednesday at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, every Wednesday on Facebook Live. And if you miss it, it'll be there. It just shows up there. It magically shows up there. It'll also be on YouTube, again, if that is your preferred method of consuming information. And I hope you will read this along with me. It's a great book. I know, because like I said, I read it already. And that's about it. So we're going to call this book club. So I hope you will show up at book club next Wednesday. Entrepreneurs Book Club, maybe we'll call it. I don't know. But that's it for tonight. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your time. And I appreciate you learning with me and giving me the opportunity to learn with you, because you are helping me more than you know. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful week. And I will see you back next time, Wednesday. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the likes. Wednesday, 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. Thanks, guys.